Welcome to Home Education Matters, the weekly podcast supporting you on your home education journey. Hello and welcome to another episode of Home Education Matters. And today I'm joined by Richard Clarke, who wrote the book Calm Pond, and we are going to be talking about how to support your child's well-being, particularly children who are perhaps primary aged. And so I'm really pleased to be joined by Richard because some of his ideas I think are really helpful for those of us who have children at home, and we just want to make sure that we're giving them the best possible grounding when it comes to supporting their health and their well-being. So first of all, Richard, thank you so much for joining me today, and do tell us a little bit about how you came to play a role in the home education community.
There's two things really. Regarding home education, I suppose there's been two main reasons that I'm interested in that community. First of all, I was a deputy head teacher in a big secondary school, which I am not now because my son's autistic, and I decided to go part-time because he needed that extra help. He struggled with after school and before school clubs, etc. But I dealt a lot with parents who were considering home education and sometimes gave them sort of lesson packs, etc., because I could understand fully the reasons for why they wanted to go that way. And I'm in a sort of similar position, I suppose, in the sense that they've come from a very small primary school of some of the children to a large secondary school, and it's very, very different for them, and it's too difficult for them to cope with. So on that score, but also on the score which I've just said there, because I am aware of the possibility that my son, who is in a very nice primary school at the moment, could well end up being home educated, because there is the potential that he could struggle at secondary school. So I've got sort of two interests. I've been in the secondary school as a teacher where I've dealt with parents who home educate, and I could well become an home educator myself in the future.
I think that scenario where a parent has their child in a kind of like cuddly feely primary school, but feels that looming, slightly daunting secondary school coming towards them, I think that is a very common scenario amongst home educators. And I think there's generally three categories of home educators. This is very broad. One category never put their children into school. The second one take them out either around SATs or going into secondary school, so year 6, year 7. And the other ones take them out year 15, not year 15, year... What is that?
About 21 then.
I know. You can tell I'm not in the school system. When they're age 15, so what's that? Year 11.
Year 11, 10 and 11.
Exams. And that seems to be they seem to be the pressure points. Well, at least the first one is an ideological choice. You don't put your child in school. But the other ones seem to be around the time of a big transition. So transition from primary to secondary. And I know that when I was a teacher back in the day, there was actually a teacher who was responsible for the transition from primary to secondary. Yes. That was their role, because it's such a big issue.
I did that job. I did that job for a spell as well. And I think the other thing that's difficult for parents is obviously as well, as a child now, my child would benefit from an EHCP. Okay. The problem with EHCPs it sort of is based on what needs they're showing at the moment and what's being provided. So you're at a snuggly little primary school where actually you don't have any needs, but you know the needs are coming. So that there's sort of no way with the EHCP that it takes into account what might happen and a prediction. And so you've got to let your child sink to a certain extent before then you can start saying, I need an EHCP, which there's a fault in the system there. There really is. And I noticed that as a secondary school teacher, we'd get some children and instantly you'd say, this child must have an EHCP. No. And then other children who come and you're surprised they've got an EHCP in comparison to some of the children who haven't. And I do think it's very much based on their experiences at primary school, without doubt.
And we did an episode on the EHCP process quite recently, and I didn't realize that it was all about basically school provision. Basically it was like, this is what
Yeah.
the school needs to be able to provide, and if they can't, you need a school that will provide these other things. So when you actually start home educating, things like they need one-to-one support and they need a relaxed, calm setting, you're doing that anyway when you home educate. So a lot of it actually becomes really quite redundant. So today we're going to be talking about the supporting our children's well-being. Now, this is a subject very close to my heart because obviously my background is psychotherapy and I'm now a life coach. So I do think it's very important that we allow our children to build up their muscles, their kind of well-being muscles from a young age. And that I always feel that this is something that school sort of drastically avoids having to do and focuses on a lot of more quantifiable things. But as home educators, we're able to make that shift and to have this focus in our home education lives. So I wonder, Richard, whether you would be able to give us some of your main pieces of advice for our parents who want to support their children's well-being.
Yeah, I think my thing has always been that it's got to be a shared experience. You know, obviously I'm coming from the school background, so that as well as school emphasising it, parents are emphasising it. But obviously for children who are home educated, it's important of what was traditionally called PSHCE in schools. You know, that personal social education, which is a really important subject, but can often struggle in the sense of, you know, a lot of people don't go to university and study PSHCE. So it's obviously a lot of teachers who are specialists in other subjects who then become the teachers of PSHCE. And there's so many important qualities that we need our children to have that I feel we need to start with as young as possible. You know, the younger we start with them, and I can see children who struggled with certain things, and by the time you've got them in secondary, to a certain extent, I think it's too late. That really needs to learn, really needs to start early. And primary schools do a great job. I think the more we can do, the better. And then sort of coupled with that, the reason I wrote the book was that I've got to be honest with this. I found my children got bored really quickly. You know, you'd start a book with 12 chapters. I thought The Hobbit was a great book when I was a child, but I read chapter 1 and it was like they were falling asleep already. And then the thrill next night of we're doing chapter 2, it wasn't really happening. And I always felt like I wanted stories which were short, you know, 5 to 10 minutes for that sort of age group between 5 and 9. Where there's meaning to it. And even if it wasn't a story they didn't enjoy, next night we're doing a different story. And that's where I felt that the learning could come through, because I thought what would be good is to have stories around characteristics that you'd want your children to have, and then have a discussion point at the end of it where you can say, well, why did this character do this? And why did this character do that? And I chose talking animals because I'm from the Disney area, you know, I'm from the talking animal area, etc. And I just like that old-fashioned idea of there's magic out there, and I just think that that's the way to portray things to children. I think they grow up too early, and I liked the idea that, you know, talking animals and animals that we can learn from.
My children and I, my children are 15 and 17, and last night we decided we were going to get takeout pizza and watch a film. And we decided we were going to watch the live action Little Mermaid film that came out last year. I don't know if you've seen it. Lots of talking animals. So we started watching it, and my son, who is 17, he's sort of like, he was scoffing a bit at the singing. Neither he nor I like a lot of singing in our films. And we were sort of like laughing a bit about it. And then my daughter paused it and was like, yeah, it isn't very good, but I would quite like to watch it. So I was like, oh, okay, yeah. You know, so we started watching it, and they loved the talking animals. It was like their favorite bit, the jokey crab and the sweet little fish and then the seagull. I mean, it was just the talking animals, even at these late teen years, they still absolutely resonate with. There's something about a cute talking animal that they can get away with so much in a book, can't they?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can portray it how you want. I suppose it's an author's cheat, really. But for me, it was just like, that's how I grew up, and I just felt like actually we need that a little bit in our children. They're on the phones from such a young age now and things like that, and just a traditional story where there's dialogue, you know, between parent and child and carer and child. I just think it's so important.
I think as well that idea of using a book as a discussion prompt is very much in a very solid long tradition, isn't it? This idea, you know, from really very early on. I'm thinking of like Victorian literature, just so stories, things like this, that were very much on this idea of what sort of lesson do you want to teach the child? And I think these slightly went out of favor, but I think there's been a bit of resurgence about this idea that you can actually convey through good quality children's literature, you can actually convey a certain moral message.
Yeah, without doubt. I mean, I love, and I wrote my book before this, and I can't give it the full title. It's the horse, the bull, the fox, and and I just think, I watched that and I think, how did he do that? Because all it is like sayings, but it's such a deep message, because I think when I sit with my children and they watch that, I do have to explain it to them, because at the end it's like, well, the boy didn't have a home, and at the end he didn't have a home. But there's so much you can talk. Yeah, but okay, what could it have been? Well, and we had a long discussion about how the animals had bonded, and they all had different personalities. And I know the psychology of it is it's actually 4 personalities of the same person. I think that's the deeper meaning of it. But I just think there's so many fantastic sayings and things to discuss in that. But how it's put together, I still can't explain myself, because there's not much of a story going on there. But there is so much of a story going on there. It's a fantastic piece of work.
Yeah, it is. It's a very popular book. And my favorite book when my children were younger was a book called something like The Boy and the Bear in the Boat, or The Boy and the Bear and the Boat. And it never really became very popular, but it's a very beautiful book about which is a very, very unusually written, which is just about a boy and a bear in a boat, and nothing happens. They get in the boat, they travel across a lake, and they get to the other side. Nothing, no plot, just this very beautiful, gentle dialogue between the bear and the boy. And for many years, it was my chosen gift at birthdays. Like for other children, I would always buy this book because I loved it. It was there was something about it that encapsulated something that we get a lot in home education, which is this lack of rush and a lack of a hurry and a lot of boredom and a lot of sort of gentle, just like natural rhythms. And I think as home educators, because we don't tend to have we don't have the morning rush, and we don't have the school run, and we don't have a lot of timetabling, days do become quite languorous in a very nice way. And I think maybe one thing I would say when it comes to supporting well-being of children is that I think allowing a child to be bored and discover what they're passionate about, so they have that time to find out the things that they're really interested in, rather than adopting other people's interests. I think that is a helpful one, to give them something that matters to them, so they understand that people have different things that they care about, and that's okay.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that calm bit, that's the thing, the reason I call the book Calm Pond. I mean, as I've said to you earlier, we do own the pond. The pond is actually part of the garden, if you get what I'm saying. And it is beautiful at times. It can be quite, when it's windy, and we live in Blackstone Edge, which is quite in the wilds, and it can be, sort of bashing waves as if it was the sea. And then you can go out half an hour later and it's beautiful and calm. And I think that's the key as well. We often with children, I find that and part of this is anger management, is that instantly they want to react. And there's got to be that calmness. That this is part of everything, I think, to do with the skills that they need to do. That calmness to first of all think before I act, and I think that's so important.
How do you help a child or support a child, a young child, to create that kind of moment of pause before they react in a sort of very heightened way?
The thing is, there's no one way that helps a child to do that. Every child is different, and so we have lots of different methods that we can do. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I teach secondary children, so often you can get a fidget toy will help a certain child. That's going to help them. Sometimes it's just the fact that they need a time out, just a few minutes outside the classroom. That's their period of calm. And then there's other children where I like to do the senses, which basically you feel anything, right? What can you smell? What can you see? What can you hear? And just the fact that there's been that time to reflect, that helps some children as well. In the old days, it was always the same thing. Count to 10. That was always the stock answer for if you're feeling angry, count to 10. The fact is, we're not all like that. It's the same with revision for exams and things like this. Everybody revises and everybody learns in their own way. And so is being calm. It's about finding the right strategy for the right child. And that's what education is to a certain extent. We don't all learn in the same way. There's a very famous cartoon where there's a monkey and an elephant and they say, right, all of you climb that tree. And that's the thing with it. It's a test that's easy for somebody, but not as easy for somebody else. But yet, if we gave a different test, the results will be very, very different. And it's horses for courses. Simple as that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Every child has to learn how they personally regulate their emotions. And so for some children, it's funny you were talking about counting to 10, because the procedure you mentioned about the things you can see, the things you can smell, that's the classic DBT 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. And that is actually counting. It's basically distracting your mind with other things. Now, for some children, that works really well. For others, that just won't work, because you're so in the moment that actually trying to distract yourself isn't allowing your emotions to have space. And we've been doing an interesting podcast series with Sarita Patney, and we've been talking about different approaches to parenting. And one of our episodes was about allowing your child to work through their emotions and to talk through their emotions and to sort of feel their emotions. But I do find that for some children that can't come immediately. You need to have that period of calm, like you say. Is that what your book Calm Pond is mainly about?
Yeah, it's mainly each story. So there's some of it is, but some of it isn't. So like there's obviously stories on things like empathy, understanding differences, anxiety, but there's also stories about equality and honesty and coping with change. And there's even one that's on bereavement. So it's not just, as a certain extent about calming down, but it's all about being calm in certain situations, if that makes sense. But the situations do fluctuate. Like I say, it's not all about anxieties. One is about just strengths and weaknesses, that sometimes realizing somebody might be better at this than me, but also not to do yourself down and think, well, weaknesses need to be improved. And if you are good at something, be proud of that. Be proud that you're good at something. My children, I've got one child who's brilliant at art. He loves doing, but he always puts himself down. And I find that, one of the worst things about secondary school, whenever at primary, it's as if like children love being rewarded. Then at secondary school, it becomes like some sort of shame that, I don't want to be rewarded anymore. And that's a real thing that has hurt me more at secondary school than anything else, because I want children to be proud that they've succeeded. And a lot of that is down to what they think their peer group will make of that sometimes being a success is not a good thing. Being a success on TikTok is brilliant. Being a success in your English work is not brilliant. And we've got something wrong in society when things are like that.
I think a lot of it as well for teenagers is that they don't like to stand out. There's a sense of really needing to be in a herd when you're a teenager. Yeah. And this idea that if your teacher singles you out for praise, it's still singling you out. So it's safer to just kind of amalgamate yourself into the herd. So let's take some of those topics that you mentioned. So when it comes to empathy, what would be your main piece of advice for supporting your child to become more empathetic?
I think just that every opportunity you get, that you get the children to understand the other point of view. Now, I know that's sad. You say you've got a son and a daughter, and you know how difficult that can be. But that we can, even if it's just something on the news or anything, that we try and reflect, all right, that's that point of view. But what if somebody said this? And that we're always trying to give the opposing point of view. And obviously, we have our point of view, and that's fine. That we understand, though, that people are entitled to have a different point of view. And actually something that you're doing that you might think is great might be something that somebody else is not as keen on. And it's that just understanding other people. So for me, it's every opportunity you get. I mean, watching the television can be an opportunity. Reading Calm Pond can be an opportunity. Just talking to your child, even when you're doing home tuition lessons, etc. There's so many opportunities where you can sort of think, well, how would somebody else think about this? Is there any other point of view here? And just taking every opportunity that we can.
This is very much what you were saying about the shared experience, isn't it? The idea that the parent plays a pivotal role in allowing the child to see alternatives and to let them be there to discuss them with them.
100%, yeah. That's, as I say, I think when it's a home and a school, if both have got to work together. Okay, obviously in the home, it's doubly important there that that message is getting through, that the children understand all these things. I mean, for example, resilience is one that I'm really keen on. I'm going to be honest with you. When I was 19, I broke my leg. extremely badly, to the extent of I was training to be a PE teacher. I was a semi-professional footballer, and I got told I'd not walk properly again. I'd have to give up being a PE teacher, and I'd never play football again for the rest of my life. And I didn't accept that. And basically, they gave me a caliper that fitted in the back of my shoe. It was like a big metal piece of material with a band around it, which was like so ungainly, I could hardly walk with it. But then I kept researching myself. Well, there must be something else. And somebody said, oh, there's this plastic thing that goes down the back of your leg. You can put it inside your sock. So I started using that. After, I must say, using Velcro to actually lift my leg up and tie it around my shin, which made it bleed, etc. But I was so determined that this can't be it. So I would try things again. And then when I found this plastic sheet, I started running. I started changing my action. Even with football, I went from doing these things to doing something else, if you get what I'm saying. And eventually I got back to where I was, and I did become a PE teacher, and I even played in a national football final and was getting paid to be played. And the only reason that happened was the fact that I wasn't prepared to give up. I was so resilient, and I can't explain why I was resilient, why that happened, but there was something inside me that made me think, I'm not going to give up. I want this so badly that I'm not going to give up. And that's why I think that with parents and teachers, whoever, we do have to make sure our children think that, when you fall down, you get back up again, to quote a famous song. But that I really think that that's so important. And the story in the book is about a chicken, which I thought was the best one to use, because I always think a chicken gives up really easily. And it's just a simple story where the chicken wants to jump over the fence. Nobody knows why, but keeps trying, keeps hitting the fence, smacking the face, keeps getting tips on how to run faster, how to flap her wings quicker, keeps getting it. And eventually she reaches the wall, because all she wants to see is the sun come down and the horizon and the beautiful sights that everybody's seeing that she's never had. But that is basically me, because I wanted to be in that place, if that makes sense. So resilience is a big one for me because of my personal experience, and also the fact that I see children give up far too quickly. And I think it's really important that we realize that actually failure and weakness is not a bad thing. And sometimes sadness isn't a bad thing. I think that it's important that we understand that those things can make us grow.
I think resilience is such a popular concept at the moment. I know there's a book called Grit, I think, and there's a lot of studies going on in psychological departments in America as we speak on the importance of resilience and how it's one of the most clear indicators of success in life is resilience. But I know that there's also a slight backlash against the idea of resilience, because for some neurodivergent people, resilience it's a concept that doesn't really fit with their life experience. But how would you say you can build resilience? Because it sounds like you kind of were born with it, or maybe didn't realize you had it until you were tested.
Yeah, that's the thing. I can't explain where it came from, but I just think it's that determination that I want something, and I'm going to try and keep getting it. And that basically, I suppose it's also encouragement of people around you. I think if the people around you are positive and say, you can do this, you can do this. I always remember when I was told in the hospital, the surgeon, or the consultant, it was called then, wasn't a particularly nice chap, if I was really honest. He was very matter of fact, and it was very much like, you did this playing football, so it's self-inflicted anyway. It was not pleasant. And he said, it is a 1 in a million chance that you will ever be a PE teacher, and then walked off. And the nurse at the far side heard him say this, and she just walked over and she said, perhaps you're that 1 in a million, eh? And just that, at that time, you know what I mean? It's those things. I just think it's finding things that can lift you and just make you feel a little bit better. It's that time. And so surrounding yourself with positivity and positive people. And, that's not hard. It's hard at times, especially with the times we've had recently, for people to always be positive. But I do think that helped me, that I had people around me who supported me. And just also, being able to laugh at yourself a little bit as well, and being able to realize that sometimes I can't always. I remember being in the hospital, and the hospital DJ came round, and he was talking to me, and he said, do you want me to play you a song? And I'm there, with my leg high up and everything. And I said, yeah, fine. He says, you're a young lad. You like something in charts, wouldn't you? And I said, well, yeah, that'd be nice, because he didn't have any of the songs that I liked. So he said, listen, at 2 o'clock, I'll put you on first. So I'll put on at 2 o'clock, and he says, and I've got this special song now. Here's the Proclaimers, and I could walk 500 miles. And I just thought, is he done that deliberately? Of all the songs you could. But it made me smile, in the lowest moment of my life. I'm a 19-year-old lad being told I won't walk again. And I'm getting somebody playing I Could Walk 500 miles. And the thing is, I suppose I could take it in a bad way, but I didn't. I just took it as funny. And it's that building up that part of your personality. You see the funny side of things and, take the positives.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people can feel that they're just not positive people, or that they find it difficult to find positives. But I would say that it's always possible to foster the personality that does find the positives, because it's just a habit that you get into. And so the more, it's like a confirmation bias. So when you look for negative things, or you expect negative things to happen, your brain looks for them. Just like when you're on car journeys and you're looking for red cars, you see lots more red cars than you do blue cars, because you're just looking for them. So if you train your brain to actually start expecting and looking for good things, you just see more of them, and it alters your whole mindset. It's the whole basis behind the fake it till you make it kind of mugs and t-shirts that we see. But it actually
100%.
has a strong psychological founding, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And I've also, in my personal experience as well, just make myself busy. I think if obviously you're having a downtime and then you sat on your own and you put yourself in a room on your own and you're not doing anything, then it's going to get worse for you. So even if it's taking yourself out for a walk or doing something, whatever it is, I think when your mind's busier, then you've more chance of positivity sinking in. If you just sit there and let it all sink in, it just makes you more and more depressed.
And you mentioned anxiety as one of the things that your book looks at. And I think anxiety is an issue that we see a lot in our children, perhaps not so much in younger children, but we certainly do in teenage children. And I think this idea of connecting with nature, going out for a walk, combining nature and some sort of movement is a very positive one for anxiety. But are there any other routes that you would recommend to support your child who may be having anxious thoughts?
I think I'm going to be controversial here because I am a teacher, but I think our children these days are put under much more pressure than I was as a child. I mean, for example, I had GCEs, as they were called then, and A levels. Basically kicked in when I was about 14 years old. We're now testing children from about 5 and 6 years old. And the thing is, I think the key is taking the pressure off when you need to. So I make it really clear to my children, this is where I'm going to be controversial. In the end, Key Stage 2 SATs tests, you go out and do your best. That's all it is. It's as simple as that. It's actually not really a measurement of you. It's a measurement of the school, if we were quite blunt about it, especially at Key Stage 2. And, just do the very best that you can. And do not panic. And I've had that with both my children. They've accepted it and they've done quite well in the SATs. But the fact is, I know if I was a parent saying, you better do well in your SATs, you better do well in your SATs. In the end, if you do well in your Key Stage 2 SATs, well done. But actually, it hasn't got you any GCSEs for later on in life, and it's a marker. And my son, I remember in his Key Stage 2 SATs, was absolutely middle of the road, and yet by the end of secondary school, he got the highest A level and GCSE grades in the school. And for me, we put, and as parents, it's difficult because I'm a teacher. So obviously I'm in the education system. And I think for parents that sometimes think, oh, they should be doing well in the SATs. I don't want my child to fall behind. Just don't put that pressure on. Just go out and do your best. It's as simple as that. So I think it's a case of taking the pressure off children at times as much as we can. That there's enough anxiety in school. And, we've just had a COVID outbreak. I mean, I was scared as a child that I thought that there was going to be a world war. Every time I watched the news, there was going to be a world war. That pales into insignificance compared to what our children have been through, where basically we've been locked in houses for the best part of a couple of years. And it's a case of there's an illness out there that's like going to kill you. And I think the children have shown great resilience coming through that, but we would be stupid to not think it's created more anxiety and far more difficulties in children. We've got a lot of damaged children now because of that 2 years, and we've got a lot of repairing to do. Then we really cross when there was so much debate about the academic needs of children, when the actual starting point is, let's make our children, make sure they're okay. Then when they're okay, we'll worry about the academic side. It was Parliament were making me feel pretty sick on all sides at that side, because it was this constant thing about, let's keep children until 6 o'clock at night. You know, what would that be? My worst nightmare, 9 till 6 o'clock at night, doing extra work. No. Let's be kind to our children. Let's make sure they're all right. Then we'll do the extra. And it's exactly the same with home education. Don't be blasted at, oh, they missed so much. I mean, obviously, some of us were home educating at that time as well. And I think quite a lot of parents at that stage thought, actually, I can do this and I'm capable of doing it. It gave some people the kickstart. For other people, it made them realize it's the worst thing I could ever do. But it's making sure our children are well. We've got to realize they've been through something that as children we never went through. And the main thing is the well. And then we'll worry about the academic side and that sort of thing. But putting pressure on children who've been through COVID to do well in exams, I'm finding that a little bit difficult. I think there should have been a lot more look into the mental health side of things.
I think a lot of that is as well just about how we assess children, because obviously it's impossible to assess and quantify a child's well-being and their mental health, whereas math skills and English language is much easier just to assess, and therefore you're able to grade it, and then you're able to grade the school, and then you've got data, and so it's something that it just is inherent in the school process. You mentioned expectations and how important it is that we don't put too much pressure on our children. And as a life coach to adults, I see this a lot with my adult clients, is that they put a lot of expectations on themselves, and that causes a huge amount of anxiety. So I think actually it's probably a lesson we could all learn is to just to ease some of that pressure. That the expectations that we have of ourselves are often considerably higher and more unrealistic than anybody else would have of us. And I think a lot of that does come from our childhood and from our school experience. So you also mentioned bereavement. So tell me a little bit about your approach to bereavement in the book.
Yeah, it was obviously I went through I lived with my grandma from the age of 10. My granddad died when I was 10 years old. My mum and dad had twins at that stage, and it wasn't unusual for a child to move to grandma's. I know that sounds weird now, and I went to live with my grandma, and I found that bereavement process very, very difficult, because I found, even though I was 10, I felt I was a young adult. But I felt like it was like things were taken out of my own hand. Like, well, should he go to the funeral? I could hear people talking on, should he, is he old enough to understand this? And is he old enough? And from that age, I thought, actually, I want to go to the funeral, and I want to be able to bereave. And I actually want to do something special. And I want to be able to talk positively about my granddad, because all I was seeing was like everybody crying and everybody upset. And there were part of me like, I don't want to remember this is the time of my granddad, and part of me does, because part of me remembers my grandma coming in crying, and we're always going to have memories, we can't change that. But it was the fact that I want to remember positive things. So I remember going there and somebody told a story, and I remember smiling, and that brought my granddad back. And it's that thing that I think that we sometimes think with children that we need to keep them away from it, but the fact is it is part of life. And we need to, when there is a bereavement, we need to explain it to children, talk to children about it, and also let children, if they want to do something. I think there's nothing more beautiful than a child writing a poem to their granddad or whoever it might be, and that remembrance that this was the person that I loved. So just making sure that they're part of it, and understanding that sadly bereavement is part of our lives, and actually shielding children from it. Yes, of course, there's parts we need to shield from them, but actually that they are part of that process, that somebody who's dear to them in their life has disappeared as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think quite often in so many areas, sometimes when we think that we are protecting our child from big emotions, we're actually making it harder for them to give them an outlet.
Yeah, 100%.
So maybe there is a last kind of thought or last advice that you would like to leave our listeners with today.
Well, I mean, it'd be fantastic if I say get Calm Pond as a book, because obviously it'll be really great for you. But I do think that I've written the book because I think short stories are really excellent for children. I think they're excellent for parents as well, because the last thing you want to be doing is spending half an hour with your child bored stiff, and then they're not asleep at the end of the half hour, which is the whole purpose of it. But just that it's meaningful as well, that when we have a chance for meaningful dialogue, and I don't just mean with Calm Pond, with anything that we see, if children see something, that we engage in them, and we make it a learning process. And especially with children that are obviously home educated, there is obviously more time where you're with your child, and there's going to come occasions when you can talk about this, and just that they're prepared for the things in life, and that we're creating as well as those academic skills, those strong life skills that children really need.
And I think as well, when my children were learning to read, we were living in Egypt, and the only books we had 3 Julia Donaldsons and the entire collection of Little Miss stories, because we bought them at a car boot sale in Egypt, as you do. And looking back, my children learned to read using the Little Miss stories. And then when we got back to England, I bought all the Mr. Men books, and there are an awful lot of them.
Yeah.
And they are very much similar to what you're saying. They are short stories that look at a characteristic, and very gently they nudge you towards, okay, why is it not nice to be Mr. Mean? Why is it nice to be Little Miss Sunshine? The fact that even as adults, I see girls in their 20s wearing Little Miss Sunshine t-shirts, because there's something about this idea that certain characteristics and certain strengths are just bring us joy as a society. So, okay, so for all of our listeners, I'm sure they can find Calm Pond on Amazon. Is it on Amazon?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. That's the best place to find it at the moment. Yeah, no problem.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Richard, for coming on the podcast today and talking to us about your book Calm Pond, but also about how to support well-being in children. Thank you so much for coming on.
No, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's Home Education Matters podcast. See you at the next one. Have a lovely day.